Hi, all, and welcome to another segment of our Earth Day programming. My name is Alyssa Shearer from March for Science New York City, and today I'm joined by Shiv Soin from the New York City-based climate justice organization TreeAge. And we're here to discuss some key takeaways from a recent town hall event TreeAge held. And they held this with several candidates running for mayor in New York City. Hopefully, you viewers are aware, but this year is an election year in New York City for mayor. And so now is your chance to either get more informed or start getting informed on these candidates and some of their ideas around climate policy. So now I want to turn it over to Shiv to introduce yourself and the organization Triage, and what was your group's inspiration for holding this town hall?
Hi, Alyssa. Thank you so much for having me. And hi, everybody. My name is Shiv Soin. I use he, him pronouns, and I serve as the co-executive director of TreeAge. TreeAge is a student-led organization with over 1,000 members, high school and college, across all 5 boroughs of New York City, focused on local, city, and state change. And on March 29th, we held the New York City Student Mayoral Forum. And this was held by us at TreeAge, as well as our partners at Churches United for Fair Housing, or CUF, and PSE CUNY, which is the CUNY-wide teachers union. And the organizations brought together 6 candidates. So this was Brad Lander, Zoran Mamdani, Zelner Myrie, Jessica Ramos, Whitney Tilson, and Michael Blake, who came and actually attended a full school day. We sent them to PS 2025, and they became students for the day because at the end of the day, young people are such an important demographic when it comes to voting. Eric Adams only won by 7,000 votes, and our vote, especially as citizens of New York City, has a real ability to make change in this election. So that's why we wanted to send them back to school, because at the end of the day, these candidates have to earn our votes. They have to really speak to the students directly. And at this point in time, we had so many different questions for the candidates. And we also wanted to make it fun. So we decided to send them on a school day. And the town hall basically overall had a few different segments. We sent them to English class, where they participated in a Socratic seminar. So basically, we had each candidate get answered a question from one of our students directly, followed by government class. So we gave them 2 different crises scenarios of what would happen as like real events if they were mayor. How would different powers of theirs be used? And we wanted to get really specific answers. So we gave them 2 scenarios, the first being about climate, and what would happen when the next schools begin flooding or the next flash flood hits New York City, and like really specific plans, because Eric Adams, the last time there was a really record-breaking type of flood, he did not communicate with any principal in New York City. So we needed to make sure that the next mayor really understands this like really serious crisis that affected so many different of our members. People got like injured going to school that day. It was a real safety issue on top of like a health issue, a climate issue. So that was one really key thing we wanted them to talk about. And then the second thing was about this year's budget. So we presented all of the different numbers of the 2020s, the budget that's in proposal right now in 2025, which would then be enacted in 2026, or like the remainder of 2025 onwards. And we're like, these are the cuts that are happening at this moment in time. And how is this the budget that you would put forward, or what would you put that's different? So we had them all answer really specifically to that. And then from there, we did a rapid fire round with them on a variety of different questions about Local Law 97, which is New York City's building emissions law, to see if that's something they're still committing to. Local Law 97, our solar on schools, and our solar on public buildings at large. That's like a law that's mandated in New York City. So seeing if they're still committing to that, and a handful of other things that we can get into. And then we played Family Feud. We polled the audience who was there. And we played 2 games, which was basically 1, what does your school need more of? And 2, what's your favorite New York City slang? So it was a really fun day with the candidates, and we thank them for their time. But we did all of that basically as a precursor. So 1, informational overall for everybody. It was student focused, but I think it was so relevant to every single New Yorker, hearing what they would do in times of crises. The budget impacts literally everything in New York City. So what are their values and what are they stewarding? So I think there was a real public education element to it, certainly. And now we'll be in the next few weeks endorsing a candidate of our own for mayor. So that'll be really exciting. And members were able to ask them questions. So it was a really great event. And a lot of this will be living online and being released onwards. So if you haven't seen it, we'll continue releasing that information. And we're also posting the candidate questionnaires on our website. So those resources are also available for anybody watching.
Okay, great. That's so awesome, and I really look forward to watching it myself. So you covered a lot, which is amazing. I really like the specificity of asking about the school flooding and the budget. So was there anything notable or like surprising from some of the candidate responses to those questions? And I'm really actually quite interested in the flooding. Do you remember anything in particular somebody said to that, or yeah?
So we also allowed for follow-ups, which was very fun. And I followed up quite aggressively in that question in particular, because the candidates kind of initially got very hooked onto this sense of like, we need to communicate with everybody. And I was like, that's so great to hear. Like, I love that you want to communicate, but what follow-up question, what are you communicating exactly? And I think a few of the candidates had some ideas here. Like, I mean, we genuinely stopped a candidate for like several seconds as they were thinking through this plan. And I think really a few things I heard. The first being several candidates thought about shelter in place, really being like a strong policy that they really wanted schools to stay together. And I think there was a desire to think about this in the long-term vision, really tying this in with New York City's Department of Emergency Services. I believe Zellner Myrie also explicitly said that he would want to keep the current commissioner of the Emergency Services Department in office if he was elected. So I think that is largely the answer. Like, if there is a quote unquote correct answer here, I think that's largely part of it. But I think there was a few kind of key gaps that I heard. And I think a lot of candidates struggle to get very specific. And I think there is an innate, like, they're still running for mayor, they're not actually in office type of part of it. But I think there is also a part that hearing the question framed in that way, I do think I genuinely heard candidates kind of responding in real time to something like that. And at least my hope is, especially with Whitney Tilson, he just kind of like paused for several seconds because I asked him a follow up and he's like, are you talking about the long term school construction or like short term? And I'm like, both, because there is an emergency that's happening in the moment, but simultaneously, like, you got to plan for the future.
Hmm.
And I do think that is the takeaway that candidates had really with this explicit lens, at the very least, is what I hope. But I think there were some really interesting answers that came out of that. And just hearing how candidates even like think in that type of moment was really interesting. So there was that. I think one other thing I'd probably call out, we asked all the candidates about Local Law 99, which basically, just a quick explanation of it, it mandates solar panels on public buildings and specifically 150 megawatts to be built by 2035.
And that includes
But the
schools,
current
right?
including, so
Yeah,
schools are a big proportion of
yeah.
public buildings. It's not explicitly school buildings, but like because of such a large like building stock of school buildings, it does make up a good chunk of this portfolio. And within that, what we've seen in this year's budget is there's already money allocated to meet this goal. And what the Adams administration is saying is that there's like a few $100 million that would actually install solar panels on around 700 schools, but they only have this money allocated to begin being kicked off in 2033 to meet the 2035 goal. And they have the money allocated 2033, 2034, 35. And our question and what we're seeing and like our observations of that, especially with capital funding, when it's that far ahead, like technically, yeah, it's in the budget, but like that can be cut at any time for any reason. There's no real security to it. And also, like, trying to hit a 2035 goal in 2033 is a bit bold. Like, it's quite bold. And even in solar deployment, like solar panels in New York, we're doing a good job deploying solar. We know how to do it. It's been done again and again. And like, we can do it quickly, but doing it in 2 years on 700 buildings is like, it's a recipe for disaster. And it's like setting it up to fail. So one of the questions that we asked every candidate was, will you commit to A, keeping this funding, and B, bringing it up earlier, ideally? And every candidate said yes to that. So that was really positive to hear, because, and it sounds like, it may not sound like it's a big deal when you first hear it, but I honestly, just with the way this administration has run, and not just even Eric Adams in the past, like this money is so up in the air. And until it's passed, it's like there's no guarantee that it's happening. And that's just the way that the budget is structured to be passed every single year. So it really is important to get these commitments from candidates now because that's 6 of 10 people who are running. And like one of them very likely can be our next mayor. So to have that firm of a commitment from them, and they all emphasize throughout the entirety of the town hall that they prioritized installing and making schools renewable, making them more green. They all really understood and echoed that sentiment of climate justice. So with this firm commitment, our hope is that we can push our next mayor to actually implement a lot of these things.
Yeah, awesome. Right there with you. And so you also asked some questions that, at least on the surface, might not seem related to climate. You were asking about housing. You were asking candidates about investments into CUNY. So I was just curious if you could tell viewers why those were also some questions coming from a climate justice organization, and again, any interesting feedback you had from the candidates on those.
Yeah. I think there's a variety of reasons there. And I think first and foremost, I mean, we had our incredible co-sponsors, Churches United for Fair Housing, CUF, and PSC CUNY, are institutional partners and incredible advocates in terms of higher education, the CUNY system, and and housing in New York City, which we are in a historic crisis. So I think there's just the natural, like all of our organizations coming together. I deeply love both organizations, the work that they do. I have so much respect, and so does our all of our members, all of our organizations. So there was just a labor of love, I think, at the first, like just kind of core element of it. But I think second, like it is a student mayoral forum. And at this point in time, young people are going into a housing market in New York City that is a historic crisis. Like it's so unaffordable to live in New York City at this moment without roommates, without having some sort of like family support or anything like that. And it's just at a point right now where every single young person is really freaking out because there's no stability. And that is such a core part of what it means being a student in New York City at this moment in time. So we certainly wanted to include that.
Mhm.
And CUNY and all of these are tied together. I think climate justice and higher education, something that we've been talking a lot about and we've been working with PSC CUNY on is the state recently released the 10 highest publicly owned facilities in New York State. And like that, like so large kind of entities and like cumulatively, how much are they polluting? And on that list are a handful of prisons. There's a handful of offices, and then there's also Brooklyn College. There is like Hunter College, City College. Like CUNY buildings are some of the highest emitting buildings in New York State, facilities that the state owns. And there is a decarbonization plan in place, but there's also simultaneously historic underinvestment in CUNY. We have chapters right now on 4 CUNY campuses. We have more chapters growing. We have hundreds of members that are CUNY students. So what happens to CUNY both as an institution, as it's been getting underfunded, that is so relevant and important. B, it's just such a huge climate issue. Like if we're actually talking about reducing emissions solidly in New York State, we do start with CUNY buildings. And that is a just way, that's an equitable way, especially for young people and students. It's a workplace. PSC CUNY, there's so many faculty members that are PSC CUNY members that work in these highly emitting facilities. So it's a combination of all of the above. And I think I said this earlier too, but I hope everybody after this can take a look. We'll be releasing all of the videos from it. The forum questionnaires are online. Like it's just like also a service. Like we can't not invite candidates and not ask them questions on a variety of different issues. So I think that's all combined. I think the honestly, we asked a bit about immigration. We asked a little bit about housing. There was Zellner Myrie was like the main candidate who spoke about it with the million homes. And I think our kind of big question that I still don't think I really heard the answer to is people like Zellner Myrie proposed a million homes. Other people are talking about hundreds of thousands of homes. People are talking about all these innovation and infrastructural projects. But New York City, it's so expensive to build to the point where nobody's building anything and projects are getting underfunded. Then they're getting scrapped completely by the city. We have such low supply of housing. And I don't really think at this moment in time, candidates have a really good answer to it. I think they have thoughts of answers. I don't think I've heard enough. And there's still like 70, 80 days to the election. And I'm not saying that like they'll have everything solved, but I do think we need to hear more from them, especially on housing, especially like climate and infrastructure building. I think is such a huge component of this that they don't have good answers for right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's an ever pressing issue. And yeah, I'm really glad you held them to it on that, and hopefully we'll hear more from them going
Yeah.
forward. Okay, so that's super awesome that you were asking them all this stuff. And now I'm thinking, there might be other young students just like your group, either in New York City or maybe elsewhere in the country, with other elections who might want to do something similar, whether it's for mayor or another election. So do you have any advice to other young groups, trying to get together candidates to ask these important questions?
Yeah. I'd say plan early. That's like my first piece of advice. Every candidate, like running for mayor of New York City, a city of 8.5 million people, and as big of a city as it is, like they are really like I sympathize with anybody running for mayor in terms of just the time and commitment and dedication it takes to yourself and your city. And with that just comes like you have to be really good at just like the logistics end of literally getting the candidates to that physical place. And that is one of the most important tasks. From there, we did like I said this, but we did a lot of review of other forums as well. We wanted to be additive to the environment, not necessarily just regurgitate the same questions. So, what were things that we hadn't heard about or other people, topics, anything of the sort? So, I think if you're doing it, plan early, reach out to them, just put it on the calendar, and just keep reminding them the closer you get to it, especially. And then I think it's also like, what are the questions you genuinely want to ask them? We had an open question form, so folks were able to submit questions that they had. So there were questions incorporated from there. But also we had open membership meetings to discuss the format, to discuss the questions, what folks wanted to do. So there was a very open process to try to get all of this together. And I think that that's also really key. But I think it's incredible that you're doing that, and make sure it's publicly documented as well, because folks will want to see the results after. And yeah, I think those would be the main things. And good luck to anybody doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally echo that. Candidates are really pressed for time, and I know with March for Science, when we've tried to do things before, it's really not wise to ask them what day works best, but to just set a date, invite them, and see who can make it to that date. Because yeah, everybody's schedules are crazy. So
Yeah.
yeah, and definitely making it public afterwards so it can be educational to everybody is also awesome. Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. So thank you again, Shiv, for all your really wonderful advice and insight into this, and for hosting the event. And I look forward to you sharing the group sharing that for everybody later on. So just the last few little reminders. So like we've been mentioning, it's a election year here in New York City. So we have the primaries coming up June 24th. There's also early voting in the week around that as well. So that's when we will select the candidate for each party. And that's actually really quite important in New York, especially when you have so many candidates running for the Democrats. And so the registration for that is by June 14th, and you need to be registered with a party to be able to pick the candidate for that party going forward. And the other last little reminder is that this is going to be ranked choice voting again. So not just really picking one candidate, but you get to pick up to five and rank them 1 through 5. So it's really nice that we get to do that, but it does maybe take a little bit more homework on the voter to be knowledgeable of 5 candidates that you would like to rank. You don't have to rank 5, but you have the opportunity to. Um, and yeah, just make sure you have your voting plan in place. Remember, where you're going to be voting, what time, who you're going to be voting for when you walk in the door, and then that should make it a very easy process. So thank you again for attending our Earth Day programming, and we hope this is helpful, and have a good time being civically engaged.